What does wearing a hijab represent to you?
Your definition is probably much different from that of Iranian citizens. To them, hijabs represent morality, chastity, and strong belief in the Islamic rule. In Iran's theocratic government, extreme religious attitudes have created repressive laws that require women to cover themselves and not be able to wear what they like. Many theocratic governments exist in the world and oppress their citizens in similar ways, but not many people know what a theocracy actually is. Simply put, a theocracy is a government run by God. However, in practice, it is much more complicated. Every part of the government in a theocracy must be set up in accordance with its religion. The laws are set out in accordance with the religion's main text, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, etc., and the courts are run by religious officials such as priests.
This is a graph representing the view of several Middle Eastern countries' citizens on the rule of the Sharia law. The Sharia law is what Iran runs on and supports fundamental Islam. As you can see, most of Iran's citizens strongly support Sharia law as a source of legislation, but a few people out of the citizens, presumably the minorities, do not agree with this and want a legislation not based on religion.
None of these guidelines are inherently bad or could really be a problem. However, a negative side of the theocratic government is the fact that they do not tolerate freedom of expression. Because the government is based on a single view, an opposing voice that gained a following among the theocracy's citizens could threaten the stability of the entire government. Taking away citizens' freedom of expression is justified by this, and keeping the government and society stable is more important to them than the welfare of their citizens. However, along with freedom of expression comes a multitude of other rights: equality, freedom of speech, right to happiness, and many more. When theocracies take away freedom of expression, often these rights are taken away too. So, today I will be focusing on a single question. In what ways does Iran's theocratic government restrict the rights of its citizens, particularly women, and why have these abuses of rights been overlooked or ignored by the global community? Iran is very unequal about its distribution of rights. Minorities are heavily persecuted and not given the same rights as regular Muslim citizens. For women, conditions are especially horrific. A woman is viewed as the property of her husband, and without their husband's approval, she will not be allowed to leave the country. Women are viewed as only half as important as a male Muslim and are not allowed to express their views openly. Hijabs must be worn in public by all women, and if they are not worn, they are picked up by the morality police and can be jailed. Occasionally, any woman who disobeys any of these rules set out for her is subject to an honor killing. An honor killing is an extremely archaic practice of killing a family member who is believed to have brought shame on the family by ways such as refusing to enter an arranged marriage, dressing in inappropriate ways, or being the victim of rape, or engaging in homosexual relationships.
Recently, crackdowns by the moral police have gotten even more extreme. This woman was arrested for wearing a figure-hugging coat and a flimsy hijab. Although she technically was not breaking any rules because she was wearing the hijab, the laws have become so distorted that she could face a jail term of up to 2 months.
However, women are not the only ones affected by these gross mistreatments.
As you can see, this is a graph of the overall inequalities. It compares rural areas, urban areas in Iran, but at almost every point in time except for the late 1980s, Iran's inequality index is noticeably above both of the others.
Religious minorities are also affected. If a Muslim and a non-Muslim were to commit the same crime, the non-Muslim would be punished drastically worse than the Muslim. Certain faiths are illegal to worship, and if people are caught practicing them, harsh punishments result. Among these religions is the Baha'i religion. It is seen as counter-Islam and has been outlawed by the Iranian government. Anyone caught worshipping its belief faces charges in treason, which can result in death. A written statement of the Baha'i international community to the UN Economic and Social Council in 2003 stated that since 1979, more than 200 Baha'is had been executed or otherwise killed, and 15 had disappeared, who were also presumably dead. There are only around 300,000 Baha'is in all of Iran. Alongside this, many restrictions have been placed on this religion. Some of these include the destruction of Baha'in cemeteries, unfair treatment in court, little access to education, a lack of legal recognition of marriages and divorces between members, and the loss of inheritance rights. All Iranian minorities are treated as an afterthought, treated like second-class citizens.
This is an image taken on March 24th of this year at a Sunni execution. Sunni is a branch of Muslim, but in Iran they are the minority branch at only 10 to 13% of the citizens. Shiites are overwhelmingly dominant at 87 to 90%. These citizens were charged of treason and theft, but it is unclear how many of the charges were actually justified or just based out of religious oppression.
So why has nothing been done to help these struggling minorities and reform the government? The UN and other outside sources cannot step in because upsetting the current government would have worse results than the current horrific discrimination. If the theocracy was overthrown and a democracy was put in place, chaos would ensue. Many terrorist groups have more public support than actual political parties, and if a democracy were installed, more likely than not, a terrorist organization would be running the country. We are used to thinking of democracy as a good thing that solves problems like inequality, repression, and misrepresentation. But in the Middle East, this is not the case. The public support does not go to whichever person or party would most benefit the country in the long run and make it a more stable, prosperous place, but instead goes to the person or party that promises to make the voters wealthier and more equal to the rest of the world as soon as possible. The groups that are able to offer this often are terrorists and propose to gain equality through targeting and lessening the positions of other countries instead of strengthening themselves. If the current theocracy was disbanded, the country would collapse under a terrorist regime, and the overall life quality of the citizens within Iran would plummet.
This is an image taken in the Syrian town of Kobani, which is under the rule of ISIS. If Iran were to reform its government, the results could be it ending up like this town.
To make matters worse, Iran is in the possession of nuclear weapons and is prepared to use them. The United States and Israel have placed sanctions on Iran, but to little or no avail. Overall, the global community is on very delicate terms with Iran, and because of this, the UN and world in general has a high incentive not to do anything that could potentially disrupt Iran. This diagram depicts Iran's nuclear facilities and how the Iranian nuclear program is a growing issue in the world. Although their missiles do not yet have the power to reach North America, if they continue on their current path, soon they will be powerful enough to. Ultimately, Iran abuses the rights of its citizens under the pretense of following its religion, and because of potential threats to the UN and the world altogether, outside forces can't right this problem. This is an extremely pressing world issue, but one without an obvious solution. However, with support and widespread public knowledge, a solution can slowly be formed and implemented. Together, we can make it so minorities can live their own lives, uninterrupted by repression and discrimination. Equality and freedom of expression are rights every single person deserves, regardless of gender, views, or religion.